Well, good day everyone. Matt Playford here, and I'm going to be talking to you about managing cattle parasites, and particularly to introduce the ParaBoss website, which is a suite of tools and information that you can use to find out all about how to manage cattle parasites. Now, this is where I live in Camden in New South Wales, and you can see we've got pretty good pastures and pretty fat cattle, because we get even rainfall right throughout the year. And you might be interested to know we've had cattle here for 233 years, longer than anywhere else in Australia, because the cattle that came with the first colonists on the first fleet in 1788 escaped, and they came out here to a place they call the cow pastures. So we've also had parasites for longer than any other place in Australia. And I'll just show you what I mean. This map shows the density of cattle across Australia, and where we're from, around, central New South Wales, this central coastal part of New South Wales, we've got more than 50 head per square kilometre. And yet here in central Australia, the density's down around, well, you can tell me, but it looks like it's about 1 or 2 head per square kilometre. And that's because in the arid zone with low rainfall, grazing, you've actually got less pasture available. And that means less parasites. However, that's all about to change. This area that you know as God's own country, because you don't have the problems that we have to deal with on a regular basis with parasites, has been subject to rain. And again, I'm not telling you anything, you know all about it. But this colour here on the map, this dark blue, is something we see very rarely. And I'm taking that as a warning sign, because with great power comes great responsibility, and with lots of rain comes lots of parasites. So I'm here to tell you what to expect over the next few months. Now, when you look at ParaBoss, you can look up different topics if you want using this search bar at the top of the screen. So you just go to the ParaBoss website and you can type in whatever you want to know about in that search bar. For example, if you're an organic producer and you want to know how to manage your cattle to avoid having to use chemicals, you can find out about it there. Alternatively, if you want to just browse through the different topics, you can use the menu down the left-hand side to find the topic you want to learn about. Now, I'll just take you through a few of the highlights of ParaBoss. The first one is TickBoss. Now, ticks in the Northern Territory in your area are a notifiable disease. So if you see any ticks, and that includes the bush tick, which is very common in our area but hasn't yet been found in the Northern Territory, then you really do need to get on the blower and notify your regional livestock biosecurity officer. And there are the numbers there on the TickBoss part of the ParaBoss website. Now, some important things about ticks. The first thing is we all know about the tick line, but there's actually 4 tick zones in the Northern Territory. And that's because those yellow areas there are control zones that may or may not have ticks. So they come in for special consideration. All the pink area is ticky, and all the green area is supposed to be tick-free. Now, cattle going from north to south need to be inspected and cleared of ticks for the obvious reasons. If they bring down ticks, they could spark a tick fever explosion. If you're sending cattle north, you've got to be really cautious that they don't go into that pink zone, pick up ticks, and of course they'll be susceptible to tick fever. And so there's a vaccine available. You can order that and get those animals prepared and vaccinated before they go up into the tick zone. Now, that red zone right up the top end there, that's where the resistant ticks are. So if you're buying cattle out of that top end area, they need special treatment before they come down into Central Australia. One thing you're sure to see over the next few months is flies. There are lots of different types of flies. These are the 4 main ones, and these are the ones that are going to infest your cattle and give them pink eye maybe. Now, the other fly, which comes down from time to time, is called buffalo fly. And that's a real nuisance. You can see this is a picture from Central Australia a couple of years back where buffalo flies were all over these cattle and they stop them from grazing, and they do spread infections as well. So you can look up the best ways to treat those buffalo flies. I wouldn't be surprised if this is another year where you get buffalo flies. Now, there are certain viruses, quite apart from the one that's common in Sydney, which means I can't travel up to be with you today, such as blue tongue. And you can see even in God's own country, there's a small patch of it there that is in the blue tongue virus zone. Now, these viruses are spread by biting insects, and so in a wet year, they are more likely to come into your area. Another one is 3-day sickness. So even back only a few years ago, the 3-day sickness zone spread right down into Central Australia. It's spread by biting midges. Don't be surprised if you see it again this year. Now, to monitor all of the different biting insects that spread disease, there are monitoring stations, and there's 2 of them there in Central Australia. They'll be able to give you alerts, so pay attention if you get a chance to your regional livestock biosecurity officers and their alerts that they'll send out to let you know what's going on. Coming back to worm boss, another problem in wetter areas is coccidiosis. Now, this has been seen on occasion in Central Australia, and I'll just take you through a little example. These graphs show the growth rates of cattle, the sentinel cattle held at the Arid Zone Research Station at Alice Springs. So they come into the research station at 10 months of age and they stay there for a year. And so these graphs show their growth rates. And on average, over the last 15, 16 years, the final average weight has been 419 kilos. But you can see there's 1 year there, the yellow line, where their weights were actually tracking well below the other animals. And that's because in that year, those cattle got coccidiosis and their final average weight was 351. So getting a dose of coccidiosis can decrease their potential growth rates by 20% or more. So it always occurs in wet conditions in a wet year. This is the year to keep an eye out for it. Now, Jocelyn Coventry has kindly provided some figures of testing that she has done in Central Australia. These were weaner male cattle, and they tested the coccidia count, and you can see more than half of them had reasonable counts of coccidia. So it's there even in a normal year. In a wet year, those coccidia survive, they spread to other cattle, and they can cause a nasty disease. The other worm species that are, or parasite species that are common in cattle in Central Australia, and this graph shows the common worms in cattle from Central Australia, thanks to Zoetis and Kate Everett. In particular, Cuperia and Barber's pole worm. Now, what impact are they going to have on your cattle? We can see again in research that was done by Jocelyn Coventry, we have more than 50% of the weaner males in the southern part of the Northern Territory have got reasonable worm burdens. Now, if they're on good tucker and if they're not sick with anything else, they'll probably be able to cope well with them, but they can impact growth rates. If you want to know exactly how much, these are the estimates. So beef cattle with even a minor worm egg count can have decreased average daily gain of 3%. But when we're looking at the counts that we're seeing in the Central Australian cattle, between 150 or over 500, that's 10 to 15% impact on their average daily gain. So you may want to do a few tests, work out what the worm egg count is of your cattle to see if they'll benefit from a treatment. So in summary, Cattle ticks are a notifiable disease, and it's always a risk bringing cattle down from the top end. Flies and other insects transmit important diseases, and they are going to increase after this recent rain. Coccidiosis is always around in the Northern Territory, but it particularly likes wet conditions, and it can sometimes cause severe weight loss. Worms are a constant cause of low-level weight loss, 10 to 15% background loss of average daily gain. And you can use paraboss.com.au to learn more about all of the parasite diseases of cattle. And I'll just show you the ParaBoss ways of getting onto ParaBoss. You can just go directly to the website, or you can scan the code and that'll take you to the website. So I want to say a big thank you to Jocelyn Coventry and Peter Saville from Northern Territory Government, Kate Everett from Zoetis, Justin from Elders in Alice Springs, Sally Lego from MLA, and the ParaBoss extended team. So thanks everyone, and I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions?
Don't be shy, no holds barred.
So we have already talked about potentially people emailing questions later if the question takes a while to formulate. And yeah, thank you for your patience waiting to give your presentation. You'll be aware we had a long session with some interruptions, but maybe hunger is a factor at this stage. So yeah, if there's no questions at the moment, just say thanks very much. It was a great presentation.
Thank you.